Hi, this is Evan Lange with The Signatry. I'm so excited to have Blain Wease with Provincial Development Group here to share a little bit about his experience since 2004, helping advising firms really grow to that next level. Blain, thank you so much for being a part. And I would just love to hear a little bit about your background and how you got into this business.
Sure. Well, originally we took a non-conventional path in that we were working with over 30 sectors doing interim executive leadership roles. And we looked up one day and realized that 80% of our traction from referrals and from other sources were all starting to rotate and center around the wealth management space. And so we thought, well, there's a message here. And we realized that our model and skill set was really apropos to that space. And we were just having the biggest impact of any of the 30 sectors there. And the other thing that we recognized that really led us to this path is over 95% of the advisors don't have a background as an executive. They don't have a background as an entrepreneur. They don't have, in a lot of cases, a formal leadership background. And so you had this paradox. And the paradox is the better you are as an advisor, the more you grow. The more you grow, the more complexity you have. The more complexity you have, the more business and leadership and operational skills that you need to help manage that in an effective manner. And that was right in the center of our sweet spot in terms of deliverables. And so that's how the marriage really solidified.
That's great, Blain. Well, and I know you've been doing this for several years now, and you've literally have gone into hundreds, if not thousands, of advising firms to really do this deep dive. How can we take you to that next level, get out of the status quo? You know what we do here at The Signatry? We live in the charitable giving space. That's the lane we run in. Have you seen charitable giving, generosity add to a financial advisor's practice?
Yes. You know, one of the trends, and it'd be interesting to compare notes on this at some point, but one of the trends that we see here is that oftentimes this is somewhat of an afterthought for advisors. So they might have a reference to it on their website or in a digital brochure, whatever the format is. But there's not a thoughtful process in place. There's not a thoughtful discovery set of questions to help understand where a client's at. And there's not a relational opportunity that's maximized between that advisor and the client. And so the way that we've seen it benefit when advisors do this really well is, number one, it's a massive differentiation opportunity. And there's a ubiquitous need in the industry for differentiation. And we can talk more about that later if we have time. The second thing is giving is one of those windows into a soul of a client, into a soul of a marriage, into a soul of the thoughtfulness towards the future that very few other topics can really unmask and bring to light. And because one of our keys to our client work is great advisors have relationships with their clients, not their clients' money. Anything that can constitute and substantiate that connection with the client, such as a giving conversation, just brings a lot of relational equity and clarity. So those, I could say more, but those are some really top of mind things on the topic.
Yeah, and I might dive a little deeper into that, Blain, because something that we preach a lot at the Signatry is how do we get out of the transactional and into the transformational? Yeah. What we see, those transformational experiences with donors, and I know in the advising space sometimes it can feel very transactional, but moving to the transformational experiences, I mean, what does that look like? Have you seen that happen with other advisors?
Yeah, well, without elongating the front end of the answer, one of the challenges that we see there, and this is specific work we do with advisors, is if you've never defined what it looks like to be transformational, you're never going to accomplish it. And that's where a lot of vagueness plays people, it prevents people from even getting started. So number one, define what transformational looks like at your firm and make it organic and attainable. And then the second part of that is, I believe that anytime it's transactional, it's a self-inflicted wound, meaning it doesn't have to be that way, but because of your mindset, lack of skills, lack of help, or other factors, that's the way that you've structured the relationship. And one of our sayings that we use both in business and life is when people teach you or inform you about who they are, believe them, right? And so that's another way of saying that if you train people, if you condition people to relate to you in a transformational manner, they will, and they're looking for that. And it's one of the reasons that advisors can have such a uniquely behind the curtain look into clients' lives, because money touches people in a way that nothing else does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things that we get to do at the Signatry is obviously work with a lot of ministries and some churches. And I know just even talking to pastors, some of them get frustrated because they say, I only get is the surface level of people, it's only skin deep. And maybe sometimes they get into some, significant issues of sin and those things, but very rarely money and finances, which is such a below the surface, where you can dive in and really have some huge transformational moments. And that's where the advisor lives in those moments. It's kind of here's everything we have. When you go into your financial advisor, you want them to have the whole picture. And kind of going off this theme of transformational versus transactional, one thing we do at the Signatry a lot is donor advised funds. We use a donor advised fund. It's a tool that we think can really open up different levels of generosity. It's not just a stagnant account. It is something that can bring families together and really be used to those transformational experiences. I was just curious, from the advising firms that you've seen, how have donor advised funds added value, or just maybe even bringing up these conversations of generosity with their clients?
Yeah. That's an interesting question for this reason. Yeah. If the advisor knows very little about the functionality and the integration of that, it actually can become a liability. Mm-hmm. If the advisor's done their homework and they really understand the fit and application, can communicate clearly and communicate on a client level, not a peer level about it. That's a very important distinction. Then I think it can lead to, it's a great tool and it can lead to some very productive conversations. The other thing to tie that topic into what we already talked about, Evan, is this. If you don't start from the very first meeting that you have or very first conversation, building that transformational reality base to the conversation, it's not going to magically appear 3 years into someone being a client. And so you sow the seeds for that donor advised conversation, or you sow the seeds for that transformational type of interaction very early on. And if you don't, it's not impossible, but it's just a lot more difficult to go back and right that opportunity that was missed in the foundation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's, it's kind of the early and often, but, one of the people that I always looked up to, he says, you can't lead somebody where you haven't gone yourself. So, so much in my conversations with advisors is really just to say, hey, you got to start talking about generosity. You got to start talking to your clients about charitable giving. Well, if the advisor hasn't taken a step themselves in generosity or charitable giving, it's going to be really hard to talk to them. I mean, you're right. It's kind of it's more the theoretical versus, hey, this is practical. We're doing this together. You're a peer in this. And so, having that aspect is such an important one as well. And we're real quick, and I just want to talk a little bit briefly because, the Signatry, we've tried to define, hey, we obviously are focused in on this generosity space and this transformational space. And we see how advisors can play such a big role of that. But really it's around the family. It's this institution of family, and how advisors can really not just advise maybe the husband and wife, or maybe even just a wife or a husband separately, but how they can come around a whole family and really provide that legacy planning, or really just try to look out for the generations. Can you kind of explain a little what you've seen there?
Yes. The first thing I'd say about that is a caution. And the reason for that is this. If you're not prepared for potential conflict or potential exposure, right? Relational exposure, marital situations that are unpleasant, then I would get prepared for that, because that can definitely emerge. And it's the people that are caught, it's the advisors that are caught flat-footed when that happens, where something good becomes something awkward or confrontational, right? So that's the first thing to say is we don't live in an ideal world without problems relationally around money, especially in marriage. Yeah. So the second thing is that, and we practice this from our approach with clients, and I think it works wonderfully for clients to exercise it, and that's this. If you want to have really good discovery questions about this that helps bring clarity from the client's perspective, you never want to have that client feel like you're trying to pin them in a corner, be like you, do something that another client's doing just because it's a good idea. That's a very poor way to approach this. So the way that we encourage on this topic and every other client service aspect that we work with our clients on is start with discovery, have really good quality questions, ask layered questions. So you're digging deeper. Tell me more about that. How did that happen? Was that something you got from your parents? Has this been a source of conflict? Whatever that is, right? There's a whole series. We could do the whole session on just the discovery, but we won't. And then be prepared to help them get clarity, because sometimes a lot of us, like myself, are verbal processors. We don't actually know until we hear ourselves say something where we might be at on a particular topic, including this one. And so being an active listener and then providing feedback. Evan, what I heard you say was this. What I heard your wife say was this. It sounds like on this you might agree, and on this there might be some further conversation to get to a point of clarity. Did I understand that right, or did I miss something? And then continue on in the conversation. So those are some relational skills that we have found to be really helpful.
Yeah, no, that's something that we've seen at the Signatry, and we play a role in this, but we're not the end role. The financial advisor is probably not the end role in this as well, of this legacy planning space. But it's something that I think most advisors, should go on a website, you go, oh, legacy planning, it's on there, or yes, let's plan for your legacy, and really what does that mean and look like. And so we've tried to provide some of those tools and resources for advisors to start those conversations. But you're right, you can tread into some really thick and ugly water where there's conflict and there's hurt and there's pain, from the family aspects. But what a unique role that an advisor can come alongside that. And this kind of bleeds into one of my final questions, which I know you don't work with just faith-based financial advisors, but the ones that you have, maybe it's either an advising firm or a specific advisor that has faith. I mean, how have you seen that to be a differential kind of in the marketplace, or just even in their own practice?
Yeah. Well, I see that actually in two camps, and I'll address them separately because they're very different outcomes. And I'm just speaking candidly here, Evan. Yeah. Camp A is someone who sees their faith as a part of a Sunday morning meeting or a Wednesday morning night, but it doesn't actually inform the DNA of how they do business. And we call that a bifurcated faith. A 6 day a week, I operate like everyone else, and maybe 1 day a week, I don't. For those folks, without the integration, without the whole, what I would think of as a biblical view of how faith applies to the marketplace, I think those are the advisors from a faith perspective who are more likely to be transactional and not transformative, because my personal conviction is, Evan, that a transformative relationship with a client is birthed out of a more holistic view of how your faith informs what you do in the marketplace, which leads us to the second category. For those advisors that would think more like I do, which is my faith should inform every aspect of my life, and absolutely I would not be where I'm at in business, or I wouldn't have the operating system, if you will, that I do because faith doesn't inform it. That would be that's unthinkable to me. I don't know how to divorce my faith from what I do, because I am everywhere I go, and my faith is a part of that. So that connection between the faith and transformational thinking, and then talking about giving and values and worldview and things like that, that's where I think such a rich soil is. And I think those advisors who are in that space, number one, they're truly differentiated because there's not a lot of them. Two, you have a connection with your clients and prospective clients that is almost unparalleled. I mean, I think it's such a special advantage. And then three, when it comes to opportunities to working with firms like yours, I just think there's so much more receptivity and so much more connection, because it's like in a sense, I'm not a musician, but I live in Nashville. It's like you've both been singing the same song for a while, and now you're coming together to sing a duet. Versus someone was performing jazz and someone was performing rap, and now you're trying to merge two different worlds. So yeah, maybe not the best metaphor, but I think you see where I'm going there in terms of connectivity and synchronicity.
Absolutely. Hey, as a huge Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton fan, I love them both separately, but together they're just magical. So,
Yeah.
so I get it. Absolutely.
I feel the chorus from Islands in the Stream, just, brewing up inside of you, Evan.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. You can't make old friends. It's a good one too. So no, Blain, I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for sharing. Just real quick at the end here, we probably should have done this at the beginning, but just share some of the success stories that you've seen as you go into an advising practice. Maybe it's at 300 million in assets and it grows to X, but give some of those real life examples that you've seen just in your work, helping advisors maybe do this little shift to really help them get to that next level.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is most advisors didn't get into business to be a CEO.
Yeah.
And what happens is, because of where they started, the firm is by nature founder centric. So now you've got a conflict, because I don't want to do all of these things, and yet I feel like the whole firm revolves around me. And if I'm not here, we can't buy paper clips. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but it illustrates the point. So one of the most rewarding, and there's a couple here I'll comment on, one of the most rewarding is helping advisors get back to their sweet spot, delegate more effectively, grow up a team, be able to identify how to offload tasks that someone else should be doing. A great example is we recently worked with an RIA in Bellevue, and when we started, all of the advisors had one support person who wasn't even full-time in that support role. After a year, there was a team of 4. And so now the advisors are back to doing what they can do. The founder and CEO is back to doing what only he can do. And I just remind CEOs all the time, there's no plan B for leadership, right? You can backfill a receptionist or a lot of positions, but if you're not doing CEO or leadership stuff, there's no one else that can. So it's really helping position that firm for 3 things. 1 is operational efficiency, 2 is scale, and 3 is for growth. And the first 2 are really prerequisites for healthy growth, because growth that's not well positioned for is actually a curse and not a burden, because of the complexity that it brings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate that, Blain, and just your experience of going into advising practices, seeing those, getting to that growth level, and really helping the business side of a financial advising practice. As a lawyer, I've seen this a lot. Yeah, there's really great lawyers, but they're maybe not the best in running a business. And it's a business. And so you want to know, hey, how can I differentiate myself? But really start doing those kind of basic things of the blocking and tackling, if you would, of how do we become better advisors? How can we differentiate ourselves from the 20 other advising firms that are within a square mile of our office? I think is always really important. So I really appreciate you sharing with us today. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And again, for anyone that's listening to this, we'd love to have you connect with Blain to find out more about Provincial and just how he can help your advising firm take that next level as well. Thank you so much, Blain. Really appreciate you being here with us today.
Thanks for inviting me. I've enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for the work that you're doing from a giving aspect. I'm really excited about our collaboration, because I do think that the topic that you're addressing is one of the underserved aspects of this world. Whether you're faith-based or not, I know that's your primary focus, but it's just such a meaningful topic, and there's so much good fruit that comes to everyone when they get on board with this opportunity that you're helping steward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Blain. Have a good one. God bless.
Bye. Thank you.